I'm David Scaer at Concordia Theological Seminary in Fort Wayne, and the gospel appointed for the Epiphany is the second chapter of Matthew, verses 1 through 12. And we'll read it in the Revised Standard Version. Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he who was born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and have come to worship him. When Herod heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. And they told him, In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet, And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler, who will govern my people Israel. Then Herod summoned the wise men secretly, and ascertained from them what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word, that I too may come and worship him. When they had heard the king, they went their way, and lo, the star which they had seen in the east went before them, till it came to rest over the place where the child was. And when they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy, and going into the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. Then opening their treasure, they offered him gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country another way. We are continuing the Christmas celebration into the Epiphany. For those of this is, of course, the Christmas Day of Eastern Orthodox Christianity, and it has a marvelous account. I'm always amazed at the genius quality of the evangelists, especially St. Matthew, because he introduces the account by saying that the Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king. Well, this is a mouthful, because Jesus is born in the royal city. The royal city is Bethlehem. That's the city from which where the royal house of David originated. And it goes on to say that it happened in the days of Herod the king. The evangelist has omitted a very significant word, and that is the word, the King of the Jews. That's going to be a title which is reserved for Jesus alone, and the writer would have taken note of it. We'll say more of Herod in just a moment. It says there came wise men from the east into Jerusalem. We do not know precisely where they came from. It is not necessarily so that they showed up 2 years later. That doesn't fit the account. It says Herod will. That comes from the concept that Herod killed all children, all the boy children who were under 2 years of age. Well, according to the Oriental way of thinking, a child's first birthday is the day he was born. So it would mean that he killed the boy children under 2 years of age, who have not reached their second birthday, which would be their first birthday, according to our calculations. So he killed children under 1 year. Being the thorough type of a butcher that Herod was, he probably calculated that the child Jesus was born 6 months before, but he wanted to do a thorough job and extended it for a half a year. So these were children who are nursing not 1 to 2 year olds, but children under 1 year. And if we know anything about travel in the ancient world, if they came from the east, if they came from Persia, it would not have taken them a year to get there. Commerce traveled much more quickly than that. Some have suggested they have come from Samaria. Some are maybe from over against the Jordan. That's not the point. By introducing these mysterious figures into the story, he introduces the Gentile theme. Many politicians have taken bold strokes. Instead of doing things gradually, they put their entire agenda right in the beginning. And what's Matthew's agenda? Matthew's agenda is that salvation, which belongs to the Jews, is going to include the Gentiles. Because he's going to conclude his gospel by saying, make disciples out of all the Gentiles. Not that the word nations is not really a proper translation. And even more than just saying Gentiles, out of pagans. People who are not included in the promises of first made to Israel are now going to be, those promises are now going to be applied to those people, to those who are worshiping other gods. Who are these people exactly? Well, apparently they know something about the Messiah. And we have seen his star in the east. This seems to be a reference to the to Balaam, who makes a promise that a ruler is going to come forth out of Judea, a star, a scepter. Now, if that's the case, and I think it's a defensible case, these people, these men, knew the books of Moses. This might suggest that they were Samaritans because they do not know the prophecy of Micah that the Messiah is going to come from Bethlehem. And even without the prophecy of Micah, they don't seem to be aware. David, the King David, has no significance for them. They don't believe or are aware of that particular account. So yeah, there are many possibilities who these men are. We'll go back to that in a few moments. They, however, come to see. They must have been men of prominence. We're now going through a political period. Seems like we're always in a political period, but of obtaining a new president. We're all aware of it, that people of rank, people of wealth, people of influence have access to the President of the United States. When these people they must have been leaders in wherever country they were from. They must have been leaders because they were able to get an audience with the king. Ordinary people are not. We don't get, just because we have a problem doesn't mean we can bring it to the attention of the president or get an invitation to the White House. These men did get an invitation, so they were recognized. They were recognized by how they were dressed and by what they had with them, and they already. What's amazing is they confess who Jesus is even before they meet the child. They say, "Where is he who was born King of the Jews?" Where is he born the King of the Jews? They are aware whoever this is the King of the Jews. That's in other words a way of saying, where's the Christ? And then they say, we have seen his star in the east. Now this has been used to think that they looked up in the heavens and saw the star in the east. I think it can be better translated, while we were in the east, we saw his star. Now, Matthew's going to say pretty soon, many shall come from the east and the west and sit down with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of the heavens. But the sons of the kingdom shall be thrown into the outer darkness. Matthew is beginning to show God's inclusion of all peoples in salvation, and he begins with those who are in the east. When we were in darkness and we had no knowledge of salvation, we came to the conclusion of who Jesus is. And here comes the absolute beautiful thing. We have come to worship him. Now, the point could be made that this word worship just means prostrating oneself before people in the Oriental way, the way the Muslims do it, kneeling down in front. But that's not what it means at all. Because this is the word that Satan uses to Jesus. He would give Jesus all the kingdoms of the heavens if he would bow down and proskeneo. Look at that Greek word, to worship him. I think our way of exegesis does not pay clear attention to the significance of the passages to show here is a reference to Jesus. We say, oh, we haven't got 5 or 10 passages on the deity. Here is this child, this infant, is absolute God. Their God can be found no place else but in this child, and whoever these men were, they recognize him both as the fulfillment of the Old Testament prophecy made by Balaam, and also as God himself, which continues the account with Joseph that his name shall be called Emmanuel. Emmanuel means God with us. They will worship the child. And one of the purposes of the Gospel of Matthew, it's subtle, but it's absolutely essential, and recognize it, as God is taking salvation away from the Jews who have rejected him and giving it to the Gentiles. And here the rejection begins. Because it says here, when Herod heard this, he was terrified, and all the high priests, not the chief priests, the high priests and the scholars of the people were distressed about this particular. He was troubled. They were all troubled. Now the way I always understood the story is that Herod was the guy who was disturbed. If you read the thing more carefully, and I'm not sure that I'm the one who has done that this was Jerusalem. They say was about 25,000 people at the time, not 250,000. It didn't take too long. A town, even today, a city of 25,000 is not all that big. The news spread around quickly. When these men came into town, they must have created quite a stir. It was not just 3 men traveling on 3 camels. They came with their servants. They came the whole entourage. They in some way they look different. And everybody, you know this, you live in a small community. When there's a new person in the church, a new person in a town, everybody's talking about it. These men look different. They were men of wealth. We can tell they were men of wealth by the gifts they were bringing. And it wasn't simply Herod who was. You see, Herod was not a Jew. Herod was an Edomite from Edom. He was Greek-speaking. He was part of the Roman mafia. That's how he got the job. He was Roman, and he was only a Jew because he only became a Jew to get the job. You remember Henry of Navarre was a Protestant, and when he was offered to become king of France, he said those famous words, "Paris is worth a mass. If all I have to do is go to mass and become king, okay." He did it. And so Herod said, well, someone has to be king. And he volunteered for his, by the way. He must have been a lot of historical work has been done on Herod. He's an absolute. There's been National Geographic things on PBS about Herod, and they're mostly true. They're all true. There are many books written in a popular style about Herod. Here we're entering the history. Here is the concept of the Antichrist. Herod is the one who is opposed. Herod, who pretends to be the king of Israel, is not the king of Israel, and he opposes the true king of Israel, who is Jesus. Here is the concept that the opposition to Christ is going to be found in the church itself. Herod, as the king of Israel, had certain religious obligations. And being responsible for he adopted, by the way, at the same time, he never gave up his paganism. He built an altar, a temple in Caesarea to Caesar Augustus for the emperor, for his patron. The patron gave him the job. He was a very efficient king. He was an astounding man. He was the builder of the ancient world. He built pagan temples. And he's in Jerusalem, in the house of God itself. He put a Roman eagle, a pagan symbol, on the temple. And this point is, okay, he's a pagan, but when they come in and they hear these men are looking for who the king of the Jews are, the population sides with Herod. Why? Because Herod brought peace and stability and prosperity. They really hated him. You know, when he died, he gave an order that at his deaths, he rounded up any number of men and had them killed, so that when he died, people would be weeping for him. He built a huge mausoleum in his own honor. He had fortresses. Here is the appearance of the Antichrist, and the people go along with it. It says not only were the leaders of the people upset about it, but it says, take a look in verse 3. Pasa Jerusalema, all Jerusalem with him. They are on the side of Herod. I didn't come to an appreciation of that particular verse until just recently. And now the scribes, Herod doesn't know this. Herod is not interested in the house of David. Now, we do know this, that Herod destroyed the records in Jerusalem, the genealogical ones, because he feared that the people would discover who a descendant of David. Here in Fort Wayne, we have great genealogical files in the library, just as the Mormons do. And these files are valuable to find out who's descended from whom. And for the Jews, the king of Israel, the king of Israel has to be a descendant of David. I mean, the later prophets speak about David arising. He destroyed those things, and it's kind of amusing that some say, well, Matthew and Luke didn't get the genealogy right because the records weren't right, and they copied them infallibly, but they copied wrong. No, that's not true at all. Matthew provides a genealogy, and Luke provides a genealogy to make the point that Jesus is the true descendant of Abraham and entitled to rule the people. The scribes say, in Bethlehem of Judea. And his quotation of this passage from Micah is really astounding, because he adds words to it. And you, Bethlehem, land of Judea, are in no way least, are among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come the governor, who will be a shepherd of my people Israel. I think that's absolutely amazing. The evangelist Matthew adds the words, land of Judah. to indicate that salvation is going to come from Judea. And then he changes the meaning around, because take a look at the Greek word, udamos. The original prophecy said, "You, Bethlehem, are the least among the rulers of Judah." He adds the word "not." You are not the least. Now, is it proper to say that he has that he has falsified the text by putting in a negative? No, not at all. He's absolutely genius, because as soon as you say, let's say a teacher says to a boy in school, even though you have the lowest grade, you're going to go to Harvard. Well, no longer is that child at the end of the totem pole. He's on the top. And because of the prophecy, Bethlehem is catapulted to the top. You are not the least among the rulers of Judah. We all go to the Good Shepherd theme, and that comes in after Easter from the Gospel of John. I am the Good Shepherd. But take a look at verse 6. The leader, the person who comes from Judea, will be a shepherd. You see the word poimenai? He will shepherd his people Israel. This has to bring up in the minds of the people the image of David, the shepherd boy, who is called to be the king of Israel. The church has Jesus. This person who comes will be the shepherd of Israel. The people of, and by Matthew's going to develop, we don't have to go to the Gospel of John, because Jesus said he looked at the people, and they were like sheep without a shepherd. And here you have the function and the duty of the king of Israel. He is not the. Herod had a reputation for killing anybody who stood in his way, including his own sons, including a wife or two of him. He had no right to the throne there, so he had to be very careful to pacify the Romans. The wise men must have stayed in town for some time, because in verse 7 it says he called them, so they were lodging in town. And I just love this. He called. Do you see that word akribozen? He accurately inquired of them of the time that the star appeared, and he sent them to Bethlehem. So already he's calculating. This fits the kind of character that we know of him. For this occasion, it wouldn't hurt to go to the library and see if you can acquire through interlibrary loan. And some new books come out, and I'm fascinated by them, about what kind of person he was. He calculated his way. We all know people like that who calculate. And he wanted to get this down precisely, because there was nobody who was going to take his place. And he sent them to Bethlehem, and he said in chapter 2, verse 2, "Search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word that I may come and worship him." This is absolutely gorgeous. This word akribos, which is accurately, is used by Luke, who claims that he accurately looked at the sources about the origin, about the life of Jesus. He said that he accurately did it. Here is Herod, in computer-like style, putting all the data in to come to the conclusion where this person was. It's almost like the FBI looking for potential terrorists. It's not a casual look. Check it out everywhere to find out where this is. And then he presents himself as a true worshiper of God. You have the word proskineo. The second last word in verse 8, to worship him. He wants to go to church, and when he finds the child, he wants to offer sacrifice to the child. Verse 9 says, when they had finished the conversation with the king, and it must have been, it's safe to conclude that they probably had dinner together, that Herod treated them splendidly. They just didn't come and have a chat. And behold, the star that they saw in the east went before them till it went over the head of Jesus, or where the child was. Look at the word for child, Paidion. Now, when it has been available to me, and that's been very rare, I've taken the opportunity to go to planetariums, which at this time of the year offer special Christmas programs about the star of the star. And they're all very informative. One theologian suggested that the star is an angel. And his arguments are somewhat convincing, because it speaks about in Job, the morning stars rejoice together. Star is another term for an angel. There's always the question of how the star moved. How could Bethlehem is a short walk from Jerusalem? How did the star move in that particular point? I think it's best to avoid that kind of a question, because these theories about what the star was, they are divergent theories, but I'm nevertheless fascinated by them all. But the idea that that the star is an angel that led them to the place, and what's fascinating about it, that in Eastern Orthodoxy, and that is a part of the Eastern Orthodox believers account for 1/4 of all Christians, and represents a very ancient form of Christianity. That would be Russia, Greece, Bulgaria, Romania. They also, this is their Christmas, and they also see the star as an angel, that the angel went before it. Now that's not beyond the realm of possibility, because it's the angel of the Lord that appears to Joseph. And Matthew, in his account of the resurrection, has one angel in the tomb who announces the message. But when you get within a question, this is really a topic more for a Bible class, in which you can have discussion rather than a sermon. And there are enough books that you can present all the options to the people, and they kind of enjoy that. And it says here in verse 10 that leaving Jerusalem, they saw the star, and they had great joy. Now here comes the climax. They going into the house, that's a participle, elthuntos, into the house, an ordinary house. This is not the manger. A sermon should avoid saying, well, the wise men didn't come at Christmas, they came 2 years later. Well, if you say this, somebody might say, well, okay, I'll come back to church in 2 years. Well, it wasn't 2 years. It was under a year, and maybe closer to 6 months. They saw the Paidion. Do you see the Greek word Paidion? The word for child, that's word is our word pediatrics, pediatrician. They saw the child with Mary, his mother, and falling down, they worshipped him. Now, what is so striking about this? Matthew chapter 1 is the genealogy of Joseph, the first half. The second half of the first chapter of Matthew is a rather lengthy discourse that Joseph has with the angel in a dream. So it is Joseph who has to come to terms with who the child of Jesus is, and his own self-awareness that he is not the father. That's what it's all about. He is not the father. This is a child who has been conceived by the Holy Ghost. It's a special kind of a child. It's an ordinary child, but not really an ordinary child, because this child is conceived by the Holy Ghost. Now, if you look at verse 11, Joseph is not mentioned at all. Going into the house, they saw the Pydion, the child with Mary, his mother. I think that's absolutely beautiful. Now, one of my colleagues who's retired said, well, Joseph went back to Nazareth to work. No. By the way, after the Egyptian exile, Joseph expected to go back to Bethlehem, which was his ancestral home, and continue business working there. It was not his intention. If you know that account, he is warned in a dream to avoid going near Jerusalem. He doesn't go back to Bethlehem. The significance of these words, the Pydion with his mother, the Pydion with Mary, his mother, is that Jesus does not have a human father. He is the one who comes from God. He is the one who has his origin with God. And we don't have that many icons in our church. But if you would have a picture of Christmas, and it would be the picture of not Mary with her child. It's the other way around. Look at the Greek. It's the child with his mother. Now, I don't know if you don't want to be too polemical or antagonistic in a sermon. The Roman Catholics, by the way, separate Mary from the child. In the Eastern Orthodox Church, it's the other way around. In the front, on the screen, to the right, they have Jesus as the Pantocrator, the ruler of all things. And on the left, they have this passage right here, the Pydion with his mother, the child with his mother. Here you have the beginning of Christian art. And that it's important because Jesus is both God and man. He has his origins in heaven and on earth. In heaven, he comes down from heaven and is incarnate by the Holy Ghost. And this all happened within a particular woman. Not any woman, but this one particular woman. And why isn't Joseph included in the picture? It's not because he deserted. That account that he went up to Nazareth to get a job is a bit too modern. No, but when it comes to the placing of the origin of Jesus, even though Joseph is the legal father, it is only Mary through whom Jesus possesses his humanity. And then come those words which must be looked at very carefully right here. Pazantos pros kinezan autou. Falling down, they worshipped him. It doesn't say they worship God. It says they worship the Pydion. They worship the child. And that's the whole significance of Christianity. That the God whom we worship is not in the heavens. The God whom we worship is the one who is completely involved and incarnate, not just in a man, but the infant Jesus. He is, in him dwells the fullness of the Godhead bodily. And I think that point has to be made absolutely clear. Look at the word proskeneo. These words, pesantas proskenausen, are used in the temptation of Jesus by the devil. The devil says, I'll give you all the kingdoms of the world if you fall down, pesantas prosekuneson, if you fall down and you worship me. That's what Satan says. Satan is the anti-God. He's the God of this world. But God is now found totally in the person of Jesus. This is very distinctive in Lutheran theology. It's more characteristic of Lutheran theology than it is any other of the Christian denominations. And it says here, they opened their treasures, and they carried to him gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Now, this has been argued that this is a reference to Jesus as prophet, priest, and king. Well, kings are anointed, priests are anointed, prophets are not anointed. I think the best explanation of this is that here Jesus is the priest. They recognize him as the priest. He is the one who will sacrifice himself. He is the priest and he's the sacrifice all in one. And what is significant is the first word krisan, which is the word gifts of gold. The splendor, the high priest was arrayed in gold dark garments to signify the presence of God. This is going to this projects into the future, where the high priest asked Jesus, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the living God?" Jesus said, "Yes, you're so." There you have the true King of the Jews, Jesus, with a mutilated body being held up in shame, meeting the false priest, Caiaphas, who was adorned in gold. Here is the beginning of the enthronement of Jesus as the priest who will offer his life as a sacrifice for sins. And they are again, here comes the dream. The dream only functions in the Gospel of Matthew. To avoid Herod, they went into another country. And so in this pericope for the Epiphany, we are introduced to the child Jesus as the king and the sacrifice. There was more than enough material here for one sermon, but it's one place to begin. Well, thank you very much for watching this particular presentation.